Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Well, I will say I am a shameless self-promoter in what I do, so I get all that, right?
Welcome to the Comedians and Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Cal Kaliszewski. I'm trying, Cal, to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Kaliszewski. I'm
Okay.
actually the founder and host of the Two Dudes and Killer Tunes podcast based out of Detroit. We are basically centered around live music, have guests on, talk about experiences of shows we've been to, shows we want to go to, and sometimes we get the rare band or even sometimes one of the biggest rappers of all time, DMC was on our show. So
Very
it's
cool.
been a lot of fun. We started up almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years in April, and just having a blast with it, really.
That's the way to do it. Well, Cal, you ready to get started?
I sure am.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So, Cal, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
That's a great question. I would say I think that that's probably a uh good start there, right? I always look at it as comics are kind of like you said, they just tell jokes, right? And then kind of evolve into more of the comedian, right? The storyteller and everything else. That's how I've always kind of looked at it.
All right. So then are you ready for the first question?
Sure.
All right. It's about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
That's a good question. Whew. Well, I would say that for some, I mean, that's a lot of their kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, Trying to think of the ones where kind of that unique voice that kind of captures the person, right? Uh, I'll look at like Stephen Wright. To me, he was probably one of the greatest comics, deadpan, but he also had that voice, that dry delivery that just kind of you knew it was Stephen Wright when you heard the joke. You didn't have to see him. Um, so I would say that it can be a huge part of it, you know. Now, as someone who's going in and telling stories and kind of, the more of the long drawn out type comedy, I would say not as much maybe. Because it's the story that people are focusing on. And sometimes with a comic, that voice can be part of the delivery. So I would say that's kind of my take on it.
All right. So then does authenticity matter or is illusion part of the magic?
Well, I would say authenticity always matters, right? And even if you kind of got that voice, that shtick, you can still be authentic with it. And to me, look at like Carrot Top, right? The guy was, the prop comic, but that was him. He was being authentic while he was doing it, even though it's really a character, right? So it's a tough one, and to me, like whenever I do anything, it's authentic, organic, and you like me or you don't. But it's kind of different when you think about comedy, though, because no matter what, you want everyone to like you, especially if they're coming to see you or anything like that. So, I mean, to me, authenticity is a number one with anything you do. And if you're not being authentic, even if you have that shtick, people sniff it out and it gets old, you know.
Yeah, try. And I don't know about having everybody like you. I think that might not
Well,
because the
yeah, that probably wasn't
polarity.
the best way, but um,
Well, I say
for the
because of the
most part, you want the
polarity.
masses to enjoy it. You're not always going to have everyone like you. You're going to turn some people off. But even in those times, I've seen a lot of comics deliver, some content that may be questionable, but even people that may not align with that can find humor in it, as long as you're not digging, you know what I mean? And like punching down, right? Or something like that.
Speaking of, how about punching up versus punching down? So, where do comics versus comedians subscribe to this? And let me put it in some historical context.
Okay.
Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Hmm. That's a great question. Definitely one I've never heard before. Um, so one, whether you're a comic or comedian, I always feel like punching up is definitely better than punching down, right? I think a lot of people go to shows or even, listen at home, whatever, watching reels, and you want to kind of escape from all of that stuff, right? We get punched down all the time, the average Joe. And I look at it as when you're punching up, everyone's kind of in on the joke. If you're punching down and doing kind of the, derogatory type thing, you're only catering to a certain type of person at that point, you know. So now the difference between a comic and a comedian punching down or up, I would say comics since a lot of times when I think of a comic, I'm thinking short jokes, one after another, boom, boom. To me, you're better off taking that punching up. If you're a comedian telling the story, I think you have a little more leeway, as long as if you're kind of punching down, not to be rude, but to kind of make a point and then bring it back up, and it's a tough one, because, and I've seen comics that do punch down and, let's talk Andrew Dice Clay, right? People thought he was one of the funniest people back then. You look back, it definitely didn't age well. And his whole shtick was just punching down at people in certain groups, and to me, that it might get laughs, in the beginning, but it gets old and then people to get turned off to that.
Absolutely. So, is the average Joe a victim?
Um, I don't like to say a victim, but I would say the average Joe, if you're going and hearing jokes that are kind of pointed in your direction, it can definitely turn you off. But, I wouldn't say a victim. If you're going to a show, you also kind of understand what you're getting into. I know if I'm going to go to a show, it's a comic or a comedian that I really like, and you kind of know what you're getting into going in. And sometimes they have content that may be a little off-putting, but the way they deliver it still gets the laughs. And I
All
got a
right.
great example of that.
Please.
Years ago, I went and saw Daniel Tosh, right? Which I always thought he was pretty funny. I would consider him more of a comic, jokes, and sometimes his stuff punches down. But he had the opener was Gerard Carmichael. And the joke centered around, I mean, I'll just say it was a rape joke, and I'll retell it to the best of my ability was, if that's happening to you and you see a shooting star, do you hope that it ends or do you hope that you get the $1 million? And I'm like, kind of made you think, but it's like the content really was questionable. But then again, you kind of knew going in with the people that were on the stage where they go with things, right? So um that was like one of those examples where I saw it live and I was just kind of like, whoa, you know. And then the reaction from the crowd is all over the board, and then he's trying to then keep going, and sometimes it just doesn't hit right, and then it takes away from the next joke and stuff like that too. So
Right. Yeah, sometimes you want to get a reaction at any cost. I could see that possibly
right.
being part of the repertoire there. So, so then is the audience agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Great question. Um, I would say it's a good question. Uh, Permission versus alignment. I would
Is
say it's,
Tosh aligning or getting permission or trying to?
um, I would say that it's kind of a gray area. That as far as the crowd, it's, I don't know that you're aligned or you're giving permission. You're just kind of experiencing it. You're there,
Well, you're
and it
getting
makes,
permission, right? Getting
what's
permission
that?
from getting permission from the audience.
Yes. So I would say, I mean, of course, it got the reaction, got laughs, it got everything, but it's a slippery slope, right? Because you may think that you're getting permission, you may think the audience is aligned, and then do you take it further and push it even more, or do
Well,
you kind of,
yeah, absolutely. You
or do you
take an
let that
inch.
go, and I think that's kind of a feel for them on stage. Because
Mm.
you could be getting permission or alignment in Detroit, but you go to the next place and it's a totally different ball game. That's a tough one for me. Because no, I
Well,
don't align. I don't align with those types of things, of course, but it's like you understand it's comedy, and
right.
then that's where, there's dark comedy, there's just the happy-go-lucky comedy, there's, the joke tellers, the storytellers, and all that. So I try not to fully judge something on a joke or even a story, right? More of the collective.
Right.
Would it have stopped me from going to see Daniel Tosh and Gerard Carmichael again? Absolutely not. I found him overly very funny.
Right.
But you know that some of it could be questionable content.
All right. So then how about a cultural translation of comedy? So how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Oh, gosh, I could, I mean, I just think of the different culture, like, for example, like you go to Japan, there's very strict things that you do, and some things that definitely aren't going to translate. Now, should the comedian totally change their whole routine because of that? I mean, that's a question for them, but for me, it's always be your authentic, true self. So you have to be weary of that when you go to those places. But again, like they're also booking you, right? They know
Mhm.
your repertoire, they know where you're coming from. So if they're doing that, stick to your guns, as much as you can. But yeah, you have to also take that into account because just
Uh,
because that's your thing doesn't mean that everyone buys into it. And obviously, you want to continue to grow and get to different areas and spread your message. So, it's kind of a fine line, and it's something that I would encourage people learn as much as possible when you go to other cultures and countries so that you don't really turn them off, because it's really the whole point of comedy is everyone there goes to enjoy it, to kind of get away from all the monotony of the day. So, um, to me, it's just, for me, if I'm depending on who I'm interviewing, depending on where I'm going, what shows I'm seeing, you take that into account, at least I hope that people do.
all right. So then how does the silence when your joke doesn't land hurt? Physically, emotionally, morally, or spiritually?
That's a good question. Now, for me, I know when to me, I'm not really a comic or a comedian. I love to tell stories. I love laughing with people. Um, but when mine doesn't hit, I feel it almost like an emotional thing, right? Like, oh man, that didn't hit. Um, I wouldn't say to me, it's not like a moral thing. It's more of a personal thing that, just looking within myself, like, why didn't it hit? And
Mhm.
like thinking really kind of about it and how do I get through that first, and then how do I try to minimize that as much as possible going forward?
All right. So, how about love and justice? So, is the highest function of comedy to expose injustice or to make people feel less alone while living with it?
Oh man, what a great question. Um, I would say for me, it would be fall more on like the love side, right? Versus the justice. because again,
Okay.
when you're in there with everyone, you want everyone to kind of feel like they're a part of it and they're enjoying it. And depending on the content, obviously you can work in kind of that justice side of it, but really the point is to really just have fun with everyone. That's always how I've looked at it. If I'm going to a comedy show, I just want to let everything go, enjoy whether it's a 5 minute set for the opener, an hour long set, or whatever. Um, and I have no problem with where they go with it, but to me, it's always about the experience for the crowd. You want people there, you want them to see the live show, and you want people to come out of there being like, that was amazing, and telling their friends you've got to go see this person the next time. So
All
to
right.
me, it's
So,
more of a kind of a community where everyone's just kind of having a great old time on kind of letting loose a little bit.
okay. So,
A little less
so,
serious.
right. Yeah. You don't want to, yeah, definitely a little looser. But when a joke harms someone unintentionally, does love demand accountability or does justice demand defiance?
Oh, man. So you're never going to tell jokes that don't offend someone, especially in today's day and age. I look at it, right? And my stance on that is it comes back to comedy, you know, and to me, I'll say it again, it's a fine line, right? And that's why certain people are really good at that. They walk that fine line. Yes, they may kind of hit on someone there or that, but in the end, they're a comedian. They're doing their job. And if someone doesn't like them, don't go, turn it off. Don't cancel the person over it. It, I think everyone gets a little uptight forgetting that it's just comedy.
Right.
And if some people are going to continue to just pound on certain groups or people or that, to me, that ends up turning off even more people, even fans that maybe aren't part of these people that are getting targeted, right? And that's the way I look. It goes back to like the punching down and how are you really telling the story and working it in? And to me, it's sometimes it's pretty easy to tell when someone's just having fun with it, or they're being kind of that, you know, focusing on it.
Okay. All right. So, very important question to focus on advertising and self promotion. So, who advertises themselves more, the comic, the comedian, or the magician? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
Well, I will say I am a shameless self-promoter in what I do, so I get all that, right? Um, Out of those three, I would say probably the magician because it's hard to convey magic, I guess, unless you're right there. Comedians, you can hear a joke on the radio, you can watch a reel. There's so many different ways you can retell a joke. Oh my God, I
Mhm.
saw Bill Burr and this is what he said, right? And but magic, it's almost like this little thing that no one can usually do. There's no way to show someone how what you saw. So for me, like they really have to get themselves out there to kind of separate from the rest of the herd and everything else. To me, almost everyone has heard a joke, seen a comic, something, but not everyone knows about magic or really, for me, the only time I've ever seen magic, I've never seen it live, I would watch America's Got Talent. And like some of that stuff you see is amazing. But if you don't watch something like that, how do you even know about these people? Comics, you can rattle off like so many famous ones right now. And so even without that marketing or kind of self, promotion.
Okay, so then how about censorship and offense? So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
That's a good question. I'd say it kind of depends, right? On the comic or the comedian or everyone. I think that when you're telling a story, and that again, that's where I look at it, where comics are more like rapid fire jokes, right? And sometimes if you get into that territory, especially if it's boom, 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 it may not hit. Whereas when you're telling a story, I think it's a lot, I don't want to say easier, but you can kind of weave in and out and kind of hit on some things, bring it back, kind of punch at yourself even in that. Where comics, it's just those jokes. So if you're constantly just hitting, then, it might not kind of hit as well with the crowd.
So then who survives better in the cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
Well, I would say if you're a mudslinger, you don't really care as much what you're getting back. It's almost like there's no bad press, right? If you're a
Hmm.
mudslinger, you're getting the whatever. Um, the others, hit me up on that question again. Let me think.
Who survives better in the cancel culture environment?
Yeah, who survives? Okay, so I would say, of course, depends on content. I think that the comedian could um, storm or weather that storm a little better, I think. Only because, again, like, based on content, I mean, Chappelle, right? He's probably one of the biggest comedians that's obviously touching all of different things but he's survived pretty well. He's still putting out stuff, right? Um, and I think it comes back to telling the story. Um, Again, I've seen where he's punched down on someone, but they brings it back against himself too. Whereas, comics, if you're constantly punching down, punching down, punching down, a lot of times you might feel the cancel culture a little bit more than some of the others. And then it also depends on where you're at in your career. If someone's starting out just, you know, doing that for, immediate laughs or something versus the sustained. That's the way I always look at it too. Like I equate it to work. You can pound the desk as much as you want to make people do things, and they might do it once or twice. You can tell those jokes and keep doing it, and they might laugh a couple of times. But if you keep doing that, that becomes your shtick, and then that can turn into canceling. Whereas I think with the comedians, they can, again, they weave everything in and out and can kind of weather it a little better, and you're doing, 30-minute set, it might be this part of it, and then all the other stuff comes around. So
All right.
um,
So
I don't
how
think,
about,
as far as magicians, I
yeah.
mean, as far as cancel culture, I don't really put them in the kind of that same boat as, you know, their stuff is more just in your face. The magic is the one kind of telling the story versus, and I know they can bring their kind of comedy into it as well, but I feel like they're at a different level versus comedians in that.
All right. So timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
I would say probably both. Um, it is science maybe at first, right? When you're kind of learning, and learning your pauses, learning, the delivery. Um, stuff like that. But it also becomes an art. And I say that because as you're in it in the moment, you may think that you're on, but then something changes. So to me, that becomes more of an art. And how do you figure out how to bring them back? And, without stumbling even further or whatever. So, to me, art is almost like you're kind of thinking on your feet. There's not a true science to it. It's just feel and the way things are going. But I think you have to have that science part of it at the beginning to get a true understanding of how it even works. But then the art takes over as you're kind of getting deeper in that live setting.
All right. So, Cal, you ready to enter the multiverse?
Sure.
All right. Board game Zoomcast,
Beady,
play
beady, beady,
versus
beady.
performance. So you have to choose an avatar. If comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist avatar, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist avatar, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
So I've always been like for me, I've been probably more of the first, like the guy adding color around, right? Because one, it could either be my story, it can be someone else's story, but it's adding that color around and some of the details that add to it, right? Um, and I think if you do well at that, then and the more you do it, then the timing and everything comes into it. But I would be the first one, I think.
All right. So then does comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
Wow. I would say for me, again, depends on, it could be depending on if you're actually seeing a comic versus a comedian. I think comics a lot of the time, it's kind of the sonic, it's the delivery, it's the timing, and to me, because looking at myself, like I would say more of a comedian because I tell the story and I add the color around it, whereas the comic, I mean, it's timing, it's delivery, it's your inflection, the way you're speaking, which of course goes into the comedian as well. But um, yeah, that's a tough one.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So, Cal, here on the Comedians and Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest.
Okay.
And the previous guest was Drew Sinclair. And his question for you, Cal, is: can comedy be defined as a historical era as its own place in time?
My. Did you say Socrates was your last guest?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
How about you repeat that one again? Let me make sure I got it.
Can comedy be defined as a historical era as its own place in time?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, so for me, you know, you hear a golden age of anything, right? So I remember
right.
growing up and, George Carlin, obviously, he was one of the best, right? And then, you throw in some of those other people that were around then. And I think, so yes, I think it can be. It is one, comedy is super important, I think, for everyone. Everyone needs to laugh. Everyone needs to kind of remove themselves and just enjoy that moment. Um, Comedy's always been important. You mentioned like court jesters, like way back then, right? And then think about 50s, 60s, where comedy, the Milton Berles and all those types of people, right? And seeing that evolve, I mean, it is when I think of moments in time, it could be the last 50 years. I mean, if you look at comedy in the last 50 years, and I would say the growth and just, I mean, who would have thought Bill Burr could sell out 30,000 seat arenas night after night? You know, it is an important thing because people need to laugh. And it is something that not everyone can do. And to me, I mean, just like music has its own place in history and time. So does comedy. But the thing is those things, those forms of art, they also continue to evolve. So I think that it's got its moment in time, but its time's also infinite. It's never ending. I don't ever see it going away. But I would say comedy over the years has also changed and become more important too. I mean, everyone always likes to just enjoy not worrying about life. And I think comedy is one of those things that really does that. Anything that can make you laugh. So I don't know that I answered it good at all, but I would say, yeah, it's a huge thing. And I think at a certain point in time, people realized how big it was and important. So yeah, it's a huge relevant thing. And then you just look at certain people and certain things in time where it goes and takes it even further.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I don't think that it has happened in the past, but potentially in the future it could
Mhm.
exist. That's why there's no you can't reference anything historically. So that's where I think why it's a hard question to
Yeah,
answer.
no, absolutely. And it's like comedy's evolved. It went
Right.
from just, like knock knock jokes and really kind of tame to really elaborate sometimes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So last question, legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics tight five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Great question. So I would say one of the best comics in my mind was probably like Stephen Wright. Deadpan, just joke after joke. You knew his voice, you knew everything about it. Um, but the one I mentioned, George Carlin, right? I mean, everything he joked about and talked about, I mean, it's relevant. And then looking at some of the newer ones, uh, the Bill Burrs, Tom Segura, like these, not only their comedy, but then in today's day and age, like Tom Segura, I mean, his podcast is huge, doing all different kinds of things. And I just think that when you have that kind of translates across generations and over time, Carlin, I mean, people still talk about him to this day. And I mean, I remember being 10 years old watching it with my dad and thinking, oh my God, this is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And I shared it with my kids now, So I think those are the types that live on, where there's focus on kind of like the current event stuff, but they find a way to just spin it and make you think about it, but also make you laugh at it.
Right.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, Cal, where can everyone find you online?
So I always tell everyone check out Two Dudes and Killer Tunes at on our YouTube channel, so you can find all of our video podcasts, everyone we've had, and we also have all of our concert videos from shows we go to, and we're at about 2,100 of those there. So go to YouTube first. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them. Actually started on LinkedIn of all places, believe it or not.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Which is where
Cal,
we found each other.
absolutely. Yeah, it's that's the right network situation. So that's it. So
Right,
awesome.
absolutely.
Well, Cal, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.
All right, thank you very much. It's been awesome.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard.